Welcome to the Family Pictures podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith, and I'm here with
Jim Groom.
Jim Groom, podcast number 65. Woo. We are 15 podcasts ahead of that other podcast I was mentioning, Love Factually, which I adore so much. And we do have to reach out to them at some point. I think we have some things in common that would be fun to talk about with them if they were ever interested. But they're real academics.
Yeah.
We're both alt-ac.
We are alt. We are alt, and our numbers represent that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
don't let that scare you away.
No. I don't think it ever scares anyone away. It's more like, how do we get more people to come?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're on to a new series, our third venture into looking at a director-driven series. We've done two before with John Hughes and Cameron Crowe, which was like kind of a teenager point of view smackdown, where I think we discovered through that process, I think for me, that John Hughes was interested mostly in the inner dialogue of a teenager, right? Their thinking and dreams and thoughts and expressing them. Whereas Cameron Crowe was into the real hard life of being a teenager, like the work to pay for the way of the life of going out and drinking and smoking.
It's
in
true,
the 80s
though.
or 70s.
Exactly, like working at a bowling alley. It was a really great part of that, like, smackdown.
Yeah, it was. And then we also did Alfred Hitchcock. And I think what was so cool about that one is we really learned a lot about his point of view of a woman's role in family context and work context and professional life and what they give up and imagine and dream. And it's not something I expected to find in that study. And so this time we're looking at kind of a noir study of family through the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi. And of course, we're starting with the famous white, snowy, blizzardy noir Fargo.
Yes. A great film. One of my favorites. I was saying this to you.
Yeah.
I actually own Fargo for those, media folks out there. I own it on a Laserdisc. I have one of the original, and it's like deluxe widescreen, because that was a big deal in '97 when you bought the Laserdisc.
Meanwhile, it's basically, as we know, letterboxed, right?
Exactly.
It's still at 640 by 480,
Totally.
VHS quality.
Same with the DVD, which is a 2000 DVD. And I actually watched that one as we got ready, as I prepared for this. And it was interesting because the print they took it from was pretty bad. So,
oh, really?
It was not a great print. So it's interesting to now see that. So
Jim,
anyway,
I gave you a wonderful 4K, remastered torrent. You should have just watched that.
I will, Michael. This will not be the last time I watch this film, because this film is one I come back to, I would say, every couple of years at least.
Yeah. I had actually recently just watched this, and what's sad? This was going to be the film that was going to be in our series that we were hoping to do in Italy.
That's
if you recall.
right. And we could still do that. We could still kind of repackage a lot of what we've done, because we have a ton of great stuff now. But I think it was just, we were both burning to do this one.
Yes. And, other things got in the way from preventing that from happening. But it will happen someday, Jim Groom. I will invade your community of Trento and swagger my American swaggered self, unlike James Macy, who has no swagger as the character of Jerry Lundegaard. He is swaggerless.
You betcha. He is.
We're just gonna keep. What is that like? What is this? It's like, we're doing what we can.
This is my deal, Wade. This is my deal. Anyway, he is William H. Macy. He is a discovery as a result of this film, as is Frances McDormand, both who have been actors and have done stuff before, but this movie kind of brings them to the forefront. And this movie has a tremendous amount of success. It wins 2 Oscars.
Best
screenplay and best actress.
Yeah. No, and did William H. Macy even get nominated? If he didn't, he should have. That would be a tragedy.
Good question.
I think he did. I think there were 4 nominations. Yeah, you check while I talk about a couple things.
You
So,
got it.
in a recent article in the Guardian, William H Macy was interviewed, and so was John Carroll Lynch, who plays Norm Gunderson, the Frances McDormand character's wife, Marge, and
Do you mean
they
son
both.
of a Gunderson? I love that.
And they both Macy and Lynch just like wax poetic, at least in this article that quotes them as waxing poetic about the script, is that it being just absolutely masterful and not wanting to change a single line. And even before that, Macy talks about how he got the role. He was originally slated. He auditioned for just one of the detective roles, right? Probably Marge's detective that was like on the side of the road that mistakes DLR for the start of a license plate rather than dealer plates, right? And he then got the opportunity to try out for the Jerry role, and he just like killed it. And he just was like super overconfident, in a weird way, kind of aggro actor, right? He's like, yeah, I want to do that. And he tells this story about how he went in there and he says, if you don't give me this role, I'm going to shoot your dog. That was about. And you're going to screw up your movie if you cast someone else, like
It's hard to
whoever.
see this movie with someone else in the role, right?
It's true. Both Frances McDormand and William H Macy, it
Yeah,
would not be a movie that we have if it was somebody else.
that's arguable. And I
Yeah.
think the other piece too, and it did win for original, and he did get nominated, so you were right.
Okay.
And Joel Cohen was nominated for Best Director, didn't get it. But
Right.
they did get for Best Original Screenplay. And I think, it is worth noting, like, this is when the Coen brothers come on the scene as like, these cats can write, right?
Yeah.
They're great
Yeah.
filmmakers too, but these cats can write. And this
Yeah.
film really highlights that.
And the funny thing is, they technically co-direct, but the Academy doesn't allow a co-directing credit, where it does allow co-writing credits for screenplay, which is really interesting. Um, though Joel supposedly does more of the directing, but William H Macy describes them working hand in hand on set. And they have very different personalities too, apparently, from their perspective. Another one that was kind of a fun production note. Did you ever watch any of the seasons of the Fargo TV series?
I have, absolutely. I watched two.
Eh, okay, so you watched the first one and you saw the Oliver Platt character who plays Stravos Milos, the sad sack father of a boy with his wife escaping debts, not unlike the Jerry character trying to escape some fraud and debts. And he runs out of gas right in front of the exact spot where the planted ice scraper is, and he finds that for $920,000 in cash, and uses it to build a supermarket empire in the series.
And it's interesting because that is such a remarkable scene in the movie, right? When Steve
Yeah,
Buscemi with his face shot is looking both sides, and as he
yeah,
walks away, like the futility of like, you're never gonna find this money again. Like, is another metaphor for what I think this movie is trying to communicate. But I'll save my theories there. But yeah,
yeah.
I just think. Yeah, it's just one great shot after another, one great scene after another. It is,
Mhm.
arguably a perfect movie. The pacing is
Oh yeah.
perfect. It
Oh, and the
is,
music. Yeah,
it is an
yeah.
amazing movie.
Yeah. And a couple other last notes. So back to Macy and Lynch talking about the script being perfect, but they were Macy was allowed one. It's not like an ad lib, but he pitched to them the moment where he rehearses his reaction to his wife's kidnapping to his father-in-law Wade at first, and it's so interestingly well crafted by the Coen brothers that at first you think he's talking to him immediately, but then he says it again a different way, and then he says it again a different way, and you're like, but that was a Macy's idea apparently.
And
And
one
then,
of the more memorable moments too.
oh
So
yeah,
like,
very important moment.
kudos to
Yeah,
Macy. Like that's a
yeah, and
great
it's going to
moment.
feed into your theories about communication, which I think are really interesting, and looking forward to. And the last one, the Jean Lundegaard, played by Kirsten Rudd, happens to actually be from Fargo, and she still lives there today.
I'm not surprised. I have to say, because she played that role to a T.
You
Oh my
betcha.
God. You betcha.
Dad, you staying?
Exactly.
You staying for supper? Supper. Amanda and I were just talking about that. This idea of people calling dinner supper, right? And Amanda, when she moved from the city out to the end of Long Island, and the local crowd, like that kind of calling it supper. And
absolutely.
she's like, I don't know what that is, but I'm staying. Sure, if I'm invited.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, what do we think about this movie? We can talk about let's talk about some of the obvious initial stressors, right? We have Jerry Lundegaard, who's a car salesman, literally. He's a bad one at that. Who is immediately plotting to have his wife kidnapped in the opening scene of the film. And the two would-be kidnappers, played by Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare, are immediately like, what the fuck are you doing? Right?
Yeah, they are like, you're having your wife kidnapped? Like, just ask your wife for the money. It's such a great scene.
Yeah. Fucking ask her. And they both say, fucking ask her. It's really great. And so
that's great.
In the idea is they're basically asking him to talk out his personal life, right? And he's just like waffling through that idea. And this is a big part of the William H. Macy character and Jerry, as he's constantly waffling through his life, right? And attempting to do something, failing at it for the most part, but then still sticking to that plan that's kind of moving in front of him, even though he's barely in control. And that's kind of how I saw Jerry. So much of him as this character who's just constantly witnessing his own life in front of him with very, very, maybe his hand is kind of on the stick, but it's like someone else keeps jumping in and taking it from him and shifting gears away from him. And then he's like, okay, yeah, I guess you're driving. And that's kind of Jerry for the most part, even right from the jump where he's getting accused of showing up late.
The people who he hired to kidnap his wife are saying you're a complete idiot with this plan. And,
exactly.
And it's interesting because there's also this mix-up idea of like, you were there at 7:30. We've been here for an hour, Jerry. You're supposed to be here at 7:30. And he's like, oh, no, it must be a mix-up, 8:30. But from the very beginning, you establish what an idiot Jerry is, in a lot of different ways. It is so apparent within the first, 3 or 4 minutes of this film, like that Jerry is a complete nitwit.
No. And he's also got a really really shitty relationship with his father-in-law who kind of controls him. We don't yet know he technically works for his father-in-law at this moment. The car dealership is actually owned by his father-in-law. And he's just, he's just a shitty employee that happened to marry, his daughter for the most part.
The executive sales manager.
With a lot of golf trophies. And let's get into like the production design of this film. I've watched this movie a million times and I kind of was obsessed with the production design because it's right in our wheelhouse, Jim Groom, right? Because it's set in 1987. We're children of the 80s.
Yeah.
And so much of this, even though it's the Midwest, the atmosphere of the spaces are incredibly familiar, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the homes, I don't know what kind of home you never see the home face
from the exterior,
which is interesting, right? You only see the inside of the home, which is very
familiar. The only quote unquote home we see is the hideout home of Carl and Gare.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
really disgruntled husband and wife that they kind of are.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the interior of this kind of Minneapolis suburban home in the 80s is like straight out of our memories,
The
my memories, right?
cabinets, right? The wooden
Yeah,
cabinets in the
the
kitchen,
wood, the
the
oak cabinets,
tchotchkes.
the tchotchkes. Well, the funny thing is, like, I kind of got so obsessed. I was like researching the actual Pyrex mixing bowls she had, and it wasn't hard to find them. That's how like ubiquitous these things were that were in this
Totally.
space. Like they were these forest fancies mushroom pyrex. You gotta Google them, and you're like, oh, that's them, And I'm like, and then I was suddenly like, ooh, vintage pyrex mixing bowls that are for sale on eBay. I'm gonna start buying some of this stuff.
This is my Fargo mushroom Pyrex bowl.
I'm gonna make some cookies and make a stew. I
Wait,
think she
we
was
should
making a
start a
stew.
family pictures podcast like store and
Yeah,
sell items from the house.
yeah,
That would be
yeah.
such great, like movie
Oh my
homeware.
god, I know, totally. And there's also the other things that I was like, her home. This is obviously very much, you get a sense the entire home is, it's very a home. It's her space, right?
Yeah.
Jerry is a passenger to this space. He exists in this space in the context of his father-in-law, who happens to be there when he comes home right after the kidnapping plan with Gare and Carl. And he's grumping,
That's
and
the
he's the
best.
Gophers, the University of Minnesota Gophers. It's like, oh,
I love
as
that
they
shot
score.
where
Yeah,
you're watching him watch the show. I mean,
yeah,
watch the game, and
the hockey
then
game. Yeah,
they start, and I guess they get scored on. He's like, "Oh!" He's got
he's like,
like this, almost like going to the bathroom, right? It's like this, like unbelievable, like tightness to this guy, which is
yeah,
basically what he is. Like he's the
yeah.
one who's
Wade,
like, "I
yeah,
don't want to part with this money at all costs," and
yeah,
you learn about Wade right away. It is all about money. And he's one of
yep,
those people, and there are many, and I'm sure many people listening have had this relationship where everything is filtered through money. That's how you
yeah,
control people. That's how you
yeah,
define your relationship. And, poor Jerry is in a relationship not only with Gene and their
yep,
son Scotty, but very much with Wade, who's
yeah.
essentially like, cock blocking Jerry. He's in there essentially like, you have no power, right? You're kind of a little fool who works for me. Shut the fuck
Hmm.
up, right?
And he's constantly in this context. So this relationship that Jerry has with his father-in-law is such a defining characteristic of the entire movie, because he's trying to constantly, quote unquote, prove himself, right, as a worthy, caretaker of the family. Like, and he's like, it's my deal, right?
My deal,
And
Wade.
he has the $750,000 parking lot deal, right? It's like 42 acres that he wants to turn into a parking lot. And Wade is like suspect because it's coming from Jerry, because he sees his son-in-law as a complete fucking moron. And he spells out how useless he is, because when they talk about money, he's like, he's not even included in the family's like security, because he's like, he literally says the line, Gene and Scotty never have to worry. He's like, you don't count, motherfucker.
Exactly. That is one of the great lines of this movie. And you
Yeah.
highlighted in our notes, and absolutely, like, it sets up the stage better than anything. That single
Yeah.
line, like, they never
Yeah.
have to worry. You, on the other hand, Jerry, you're on the list, and you
Yep.
make one fuck up and you're out, right?
You're out. Yeah. Oh, wow. That reminds me of, is it not, it's The Wrong Man, the Hitchcock film, where basically he's doing the same thing in The Man Who Knew Too Much. No, Strangers on a Train, where the tennis player is ingratiating himself with this really wealthy
Exactly.
political family. And if he plays along, you're going to get the fruits of this family, like the wealth of this family.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, back in strangers on a train. He's playing it admirably. He does what he's told, and he's beautiful, and he's he has actual skill, even though it's like a soft skill in terms of being a tennis player that's not going to last long.
I like that you called tennis a soft skill. Anyway,
well, in this context, it's not really.
I just like that you said that. I can like that, right?
Yeah, and here Jerry is useless. He's got nothing to bring.
Useless. Okay,
and so he does bring a deal, though. Oh wait, you go ahead.
I want to just ask a question to people out there. Like, I haven't.
Wait, someone's listening. They're going to answer this question.
Yes. No. Okay. I haven't really done the research here, but I want to. Like, what did Jerry do to get in the predicament he's in?
Oh yeah, it's technically.
We know how he got there. He basically got money for cars he never sold, and he forged the identification of the
cars don't even exist.
Yeah, so
right?
he forged the identity of them. He got $350,000, assumingly.
Yeah.
What did he do with the $350,000?
How did he blow it? Yeah.
How did he blow it?
It's not like he blew it on like lavish a yacht or like a nice car
or a nice coat or
even good clothes.
Hat.
Like, he's going to whatever local like winter wear place that exists in the Minnesota Twin Pines Mall, the Twin Cities Mall, right?
That's a great question for me. That's the great question of this film. Anyway,
it doesn't. No, it's a really important unanswerable question that the Coens feel no need to answer.
None,
right? They don't feel like it matters. It's just we get to stew in his frustration with him.
Totally.
Right? He's behind the eight ball because he's committed fraud at work. It's his father's money that he's basically spent because it will be on Wade Gustafson to have to pay it back ultimately, I would imagine. Even though it's going to be Jerry Lundegaard who receives the letter in the mail, but Gustafson's going to see it. It's his dealership eventually.
Yeah,
and so he does bring a pretty sweet deal to his father-in-law.
As Stan Grossman says, it's a pretty sweet deal, Wade.
It looks pretty sweet. No, Stan says it looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love Stan Grossman. He's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. Just the way he just like looks and chews. And
we're not a bank, Jerry. Yeah. There's so many quotable lines in this movie. We're not a bank, Jerry.
And this is part of his failure. He doesn't even recognize the money on the table is pretty significant he could get from this. So it's somehow this 42 acres is worth $750,000 and it's a great deal. And it's going to be turned into a parking lot that's going to produce income for a very long time. And Jerry's like, yeah, just give me that money and I'm going to make money and I'll pay you back, 1 point over prime.
Exactly. I guarantee I'll pay you back, he says. And that's when Wade says he's great. He's like, I'm not a damn bank, Jerry. And like, if I'm going to go that way, I'll go FDIC insured. And then you got to see who Wade is, right? Like Wade is purely about the money. Wade is about being in charge. He's about being in control. And he just basically again shoots down Jerry, and you start to feel for Jerry, even though Jerry is going to use his wife as collateral in a kidnapping.
Oh yeah.
You still feel bad because Wade is that over, how would you say, controlling of a father-in-law.
Yeah. I mean, into again, like the Coen brothers, this was another one I couldn't help look up. I was obsessed with Wade's office. He has this portrait of two lions. Makes sense, lions of industry, right?
Absolutely.
But he also has these two bronzes, which are real bronzes by this artist, Frederick Remington from the, early 1800s. And he was friends with Teddy Roosevelt and he followed him on some of his adventures, in the West. And he creates, one of them it's called the Bronco Buster, and it's this bronze of a cowboy leaping in the air, getting control of this, unyielding horse. And the other one is called the Cheyenne, and it's a Cheyenne warrior with his spear out as he's launching towards some sort of battle. And these are these these pieces of power. And those two bronzes are actually quite valuable, and they're showcasing wealth of Wade and the classic like posturing that men do in their offices with their awards, where poor Jerry just has his shitty repetition of golf trophies that are all the fucking same, and it's a million little silver men perched on top of these like crappy miniature trophies.
And and yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, and it's interesting. So as this deal, so we hear about the deal at the dinner table, and then later on, we kind of see who Jerry is and Wade is, but it does eventually go to there in Wade's office because Wade says come, and Stan Grossman's there, and like you said, they're in this big office, and Wade is playing the Lord and lording it over everyone. But Jerry turns down the 10%, which is 75,000.
Yeah, he turns down a significant amount of money,
and then he leaves. And you talk about this scene where he's trying to, and we can come back to that. But the other thing that's happening across this is that the kidnappers now are breaking into Jerry's house.
They already have.
Yeah,
no,
they
already. They're happening. It's happening at the same time. Yeah,
coinciding, right? They're doing their job. So Jerry's failed business deal here, and then boom, these guys are coming in to do their part of the business. So this is Jerry's other business deal, and so he's coming in, and
it's
from the
my
beginning,
deal. She's my wife.
She's my wife, Carl. And from the very beginning, that does not go as I think he imagined in his head. They're going to come, quietly take her. They're going to take care of her. Everything's going to be fine. From the beginning, she's freaked. I mean, there's that great scene where she's knitting on the couch, watching the morning show, and so
with her
like
big
smiling.
console television, her big, oh man, you had one of those, right?
Absolutely, yes. That was where my Atari's 2600 sat on top of.
Yeah.
And, she's looking as this guy comes up on her back porch with a ski mask on.
Right.
And she's kind of shocked, and he's sitting there, and then he doesn't see her, breaks the window. She flips out, and it's such a great scene of just like, like really horror and comedy. And there's this mix that they do in this movie that's so well. Like, it is a funny movie in some ways, but it's undergirded with horror. And she runs around. She's trying to escape them. That they're coming after her to take her away. She's fighting for her life. She bites the one guy's hand. Ultimately, ointment. Exactly. And then she goes upstairs, gets caught in the shower. He realizes she's there, and she comes out, and she's just basically blindly running around. Another metaphor for this movie. Falls down the stairs. She's done, and then they take her. But there's just like, even that scene, it's kind of parallel to the scene with Wade in the office, right? And what is Jerry doing while all this is happening?
He is just like violently trying to chip ice off of his windshield. And he has one of his two freakouts in the entire film, right? This one, along with the moment after he realizes like Carl is yelling at him for more money, and then he gets the man who's asking for the VIN numbers for the last dime, or he's going to turn the legal department at him. And both times he freaks out, and then he immediately goes back to what he was doing, pretending like nothing happened. Right. And so this is kind of Jerry's character as a man, is like shit goes bad, monstrously wrong, and he pretty much pretends like nothing's happening that's amiss, and when he arrives to his home and he has his 2 bags of groceries, hi, hon, I'm home, it's like, honey, I'm home and I got groceries. And he does that again and again. And that's the thing about the relationship between Jerry and his wife, Jean, that's important. We set this up a little bit, and before we completely go down the rabbit hole with her kidnapping, is they seem to be performing a perfect suburban life. Jerry's like maybe a little bored. It's bored domestication, but there's nothing amiss with it. He's not affectionate with her. He doesn't give her kisses or anything, but she seems perfectly happy with him. right? And he
Totally.
in happy with her, and they're in line with their caretaking of their son Scotty, who's being a little dick about like, not doing his homework, doing the bare minimum. It's like, yeah, I know, what's the word? He says like, yeah, I know what not inconsequential, it's some random,
Oh
thing. And
yeah.
she's like,
That's right. Okay, I'll look it up.
yeah, and what's so great is like there's a moment when she says, we're not going to let you play hockey, and he's like, there's no fucking way and then they're both in line as parents, and they cut him off immediately. They're like, hey, son, so they seem like they have a good relationship. Jerry, for all his like inadequacies, don't seem to bother Gene in the slightest, right?
No, I
And
mean she's thrilled seemingly. I mean, she
yeah,
seems content. You're right. I mean,
very content. Yeah,
absolutely.
she has her morning shows, she has her crochet, she has her million ceramic pigs and ceramic pig salt shakers around
Right.
her, and her succulent plants that are lined up neatly behind the couch, and it's like the irony of succulents, which are like basically warm weather plants in this like, bleak winter, landscape.
And I think there's two things. Maybe that's because she knows her dad's there, right? Her dad's a fixture in the house.
That's
That's
true.
pretty
Yeah.
clear. And
Uh-huh.
even when they're saying because the father calls while they're kind of reprimanding Scotty for, dropping the F bomb and everything.
Yeah.
And then
Hmm.
Wade says to Jerry as he's getting on the call, "What's going on over there?" and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and he's like,
Yeah.
"Nothing, nothing, nothing, don't worry." And goes
Yeah.
on and talking about, "Well, Stan Grossman wants to see you, blah blah. Can you come and meet us?" But there is that sense, that she knows she has the backup of her dad, and I wonder if
Yeah.
that's further emasculating Jerry. I don't know,
Yeah.
but you're right. It's not like you see, oh, things are terribly awry here,
Hmm.
and things are going to go wrong. In fact, you're still asking the same question that the kidnappers are. Why the
Yeah.
hell are you doing this, Jerry?
Why can't you just ask your wife for the money,
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like there's no intimacy in their conversation either. It's all classic, what's next, you would think that they go through every day with these really basic performances of the mechanics of a typical relationship, and it's not, there's no love there. And I think there, because I know relationships like this where these two, the parents deeply love one another, but at the same time there's no affection there. They're just talking about what's the next thing that has to be done in the performance of a family. There's always something to be done. There's groceries to be gotten, there's children to be ferried from one after
Yeah.
school program to the next, or sporting event to the next. There's PTA meetings if you participate in that, and so there's cars that need to be fixed. There's always something that needs to be fixed in every home, right? We both know this.
There's phantom cars that need to be, you know, gotten money for. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do with the money, Jerry?
Yeah. And so when Gene is kidnapped and he enters the space,
Yeah.
so now we're back to this where Jerry enters this space where it's really violent. Like the window, glass door has been smashed. There's
Yeah.
stuff all over the floor. There's somehow, you'd be like, why the fuck is the shower curtain in the living room at the base of the stairs, and
Yeah.
he's not, and what's so wonderful about this movie, he's not Marge Gunderson, who has not also been introduced in the film yet. And we're
Not
almost
yet.
more than a third of the way. And we're going to talk about this whole other family and whole other movie that kind of exists within this crime movie that she's obviously part of, and it's an important part of. And so what's so interesting is he just literally walks upstairs. He doesn't even put the groceries down, and he looks in the bathroom, and he's just kind of perplexed by it all. And there's no emotional register, and like, oh, fuck, this is not the way I imagined this going, even though maybe that's what he's calculating. We don't know.
And he's like a spectator to his own, the
Yeah.
disaster of his own making.
Yeah.
And that happens several times in this movie. Like he kind of
Right.
walks around after, he's kind of created this scenario of just complete wreckage, and then he's sitting walking around after it. And he really does become a despicable character, um as it goes on more and more. Not that having your wife kidnapped wasn't enough, but like it's just it for he falls deeper and deeper into that hole. But for a
Right.
minute at the beginning of the film, he's almost salvageable. He's
Well, I mean,
almost like,
he,
I kind of understand.
but even what's so funny is even until the very, very end, when he's fleeing the interview.
So good.
He's trying so hard to be normal and everything's okay
Yeah.
again and again. And he doesn't ever present himself as like the malevolent kidnappers, especially the Gare character, who's like truly menacing, right? You know, his lack of communication is a classic like villain who doesn't say anything and he looks scary as a Marlboro man would. and and you're like, what the fuck's that guy gonna do? And
Yeah.
we find out he is the more real malevolent one, but Jerry is too. But because his affectation is such a sad sack, Willy Loman styled character,
Totally.
you do feel for him.
Yeah, you definitely do. It's true. And
It's not my fault this truce coat scam, you know. It's like
and
it just comes with it, Jim. I'm sorry. I may have told you that you don't have to pay for it, or it's not going to come with that. But
and this is the
sorry.
point. I think this is the point now where we start cutting between Jerry and, the business deals leading up to that, and now the kidnappers heading towards Brainerd, and them
Yeah.
in the car at night. And there's always this thing. The movie starts in it when he's going to Fargo. It has this kind of complete haze of snow, right? Like
Hmm.
it's everything's snowed out. It's whited
Yeah.
out. And then there's kind of a blackout of snow as they're driving at night. And this happens again and again in this movie. And I kind of see it as almost like Melvillian, right? Like you got the fog coming on the water, and it's just a
Mm.
sense that it's hard to make sense of what's right, what's wrong, who's what, because it's just a lot of the whole kind of workings of the space no longer makes sense, and I'll get to that later. But now we finally are introduced through that to a whole different part of this film, to this other family, right?
Right.
And we're introduced to them because, as you said, the more malevolent of the two kidnappers actually realizing that his partner Carl is kind of an idiot, forgets to put
He's
the
a
dealer
total idiot
tags
too.
on, so they get
Yeah.
pulled over, and he's like, "I'll take care of it." Tries to pay off the cop. The cop says, "Get out of the car, sir. Please get out of the car, sir." And then so the guy basically, shoots the cop in the head. Two people come by, see it, chases them down, shoots them both execution style, and
Whoa, daddy.
whoa, daddy is right. So good.
As
And
his brain matter and blood spills in his lap.
and you hear Gene in the back, like, like just tortured by, like, think about what her
Yeah.
husband has done to her. It's just insane at this point.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then you cut to the next morning, right? Moving away from Minneapolis, where all of that happens, going to Brainerd, and then you get introduced to who? This is probably the other character alongside Jerry, maybe his, the other pole of this movie.
And it's Marge and Norm Gunderson, the sweet couple that has a baby on the way, and it's the middle of the night, and the phone rings by their bedside, and it's the way they're startled, like anyone would be, by that ring of a phone from the 80s, which was always the same. It's literally a bell being hammered by a steel pin inside that little machine, because that's how phones actually work. They were mechanical back then. They were not digital reproductions of sounds that we could choose from. It was just the banging of a bell inside a little plastic wrapped piece of machinery. And it's fucking loud and jarring, and you can't stop it either. If it's plugged in, it's going to do this. There is no silent mode in this era of living. And
Awesome.
they're popped out of their sleep, and Marge is being told of the murders, and we missed the fact that Gare also murders two that pass by in the car and witness, and he chases after them and murders them as well. Two innocents, not that the cop was an innocent. um And
Civilians.
but what's so wonderful is Norm wakes up and he's like, "Oh, you need a breakfast. I'll fix you some eggs." She's like, "No, no, Norm, no, go back to sleep. It's early. You don't have to get up yet." It's like, "No, I'll fix you some eggs. I'll fix you some eggs." And they're just kind of like talking past one another, but at the same time, and this is the beginning of, I think, where you might introduce, if you want to, some of your thesis, which is really interesting, or we can hold on to it. She's kind of listening at the same time. She's hearing him, and he makes this breakfast, and she quickly heads out, and she's got this wonderful, you know, pregnancy version of her police outfit,
You
right?
start to
With her,
realize she's pregnant.
yeah,
Exactly.
you know, she's in her uniform, but her uniform is oversized because they've you know stitched something literally together for her and her condition. And we don't know it yet, but she is the actual chief of police in Brainerd, and she's smart as a fucking whip, right? She's
That's
like
great.
very experienced cop. And but she still needs help, right? Like she walks out to go to work, and then she pops right in and she's like, "Hon, the prowler needs a jump." You know, and he immediately gets up,
Exactly.
right?
And
And they're
that
similarly, their home is very similar. You go ahead. You go
well,
ahead.
that's the picture you used for our
Yeah.
background is this
Right.
home with them
Uh-huh.
at breakfast that Norm
Right.
has prepared for her, and she's in
Right.
her cop outfit. And I love that image. I was wondering which one you were going to choose, and I should have guessed that. I didn't. But one of my favorite shots of the whole film is them in the breakfast nook, and then
Yeah.
also the shot of him sitting at the breakfast nook as she leaves, and then her coming back, right? And so
Mm,
you get that shot of both those
yeah.
actions, one not knowing of the other. I think it's such a great shot. And that's when she
Yeah.
says, the prowler needs a jump. Love that. Anyway, back to you.
And funny, what's so funny is John Carroll Lynch is performing his high school quote in his yearbook quote. Apparently, he's finishing her meal. Like that's it's like I'll finish that for you was his high school yearbook quote. John Carroll Lynch. I'll finish that. So he's actually performing that in this moment when he's finishing the eggs that she hasn't eaten. And yeah, what's also interesting is they're very similar homes in a funny way. Theirs is more modest, but it's not like the Lundegaard household is opulent by any stretch of the imagination. It's
No,
upper middle class, and they're very much like working middle class family. They're doing okay, and it's it's seemingly slightly warmer, but not necessarily, right? Like he's a painter, so we see the fixtures of the his work as a painter of ducks in the Canadian goose painting that introduces their space, along with the taxidermy ducks that exist there with all the painting supplies and books that are in the bedroom,
that's
by the
so
way,
great.
which is his like workspace, which makes you realize it's a more modest space. But at the same time, it has just as many ceramic figurines as the Lundegards do, right? In the background of the image that you showed everyone for those watching on YouTube. And I love that about them is there's certain parallels between these two families in a sense. Like they're not so dissimilar, but their relationships are very, very different. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, Norm is like let's do a little bit of the play by play
Yeah.
because I do like this and it can start to get me into some of my theories. So she leaves, and where she goes is she goes to the crime scene and she's looking at first, she looks at the two civilians who were shot. And she's kind of analyzing, and it's just such a great way to introduce her character because
Yeah.
she's like, looks like this one was doing a defensive wound, and she's kind of analyzing it in what seems like a very, I don't know, like colloquial way, but
Hmm.
really reproduces what happened brilliantly.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
both the language is belying her brilliance in terms of as police work, right? And
Yeah.
that's a kind of theme throughout the movie. And so she's going through this, and then she bends over, and her partner's like, "Are you all right, Margie? Like, are you getting sick from seeing all this?" And she's like, "Nope, just morning sickness." So there's always like a joke in there, and like they're having so much fun. They go
Yeah.
back and then they see the trooper, or maybe yeah, I think they see the trooper after that. And that's when she says to her partner, like, "Hey, do you think so and so's name is open?" And he's one of the like people in the community. And her partner's like, you don't think he had anything to do with this? And she's like, no, no, no. I just want to get night crawlers for Norm because he's going fishing. And there's like these moments where language isn't always working, right? They're not communicating. There's another point where he gets in the car, and I don't know if it's before or after that scene, where they're driving off, and he basically says, I have an APB out for a plate
Yeah,
starting
it's
with,
immediately after. It's a continuation of the scene,
right.
basically.
And it's like, I have an APB out for a plate with DLR, right? And so that's the beginning. He must have gotten, he believes, her partner, that must have gotten, or the cop must have gotten shot before he finished the plate. So he believes it's a Tan Sierra with the plates
It's
DLR.
like Monty Python and the recording of the guy. It's like, and they went into the place, and it's
Exactly.
It's like, so he got shot while he was writing the license plate.
He says,
people don't say when their guy die. Don't write it's that kind of comedy almost, though.
It is that kind of, but she's great because she's like, I'm not so sure I believe, I'm not so sure I agree with your police work there, Dan, or whatever she says. And then she
really
goes
funny.
and
She's so polite.
and she gets to what they want to do, which is basically look for dealer plates for a Tan Sierra, blah, 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 which leads them down a whole thing. The next part is she walks back into her office, and you learn now that she's a chief of police.
Yeah.
And as soon as she gets to her office, who's there?
Norm
With
Arby's.
With Arby's.
And this becomes the
great.
second of every scene between them, minus the final scene when they're in bed together. They're having food together, right? So they're having eggs in the morning. He's brought her lunch, which is some Arby's, and she's very excited about this Arby's, which is really great. Like the bad fast food. And they go to this buffet, and they heap piles and piles of food, all you can eat food buffet style. And they're eating together. And even this scene that you're going to talk about in terms of what they're watching on TV being an interesting metaphor. But the funny thing is they're both falling asleep watching TV together, and he's got a bag of chips at his arm, So they're always eating together. And I just love that about their relationship, that portrait of their relationship.
And I have to say, though, those all-you-can-eat places, like, so brilliantly portrayed by them.
Yeah.
But, they're so disgusting to see them put that food on the plate. And there was a guy who used to fix...
It's the kind of place, though, when we were in high school, we would fucking love, right?
Yeah, I guess. I went to them. The only one I went to was recently. And it was like 5 years ago when Tim and I were starting the arcade. There was this guy.
Okay.
His name was the Arcade Buffet. And the fact is the reason they called him that is because he loved to eat all-you-can-eat buffets. And so in order for us to get him...
Was he a big man, Jim?
He was a big man. And for us to get him to fix, monitors, we still had to pay him. But we could seduce him by saying, there's an all-you-can-eat buffet down here in Fredericksburg. If you come and fix some of our monitors, we'll take you to the buffet. And he was like, I'm there. And we would go, and he would fill up his plate with the most disgusting combination of food, like they do in this. And I see it, and I think of the arcade buffet, and I get disgusted, and Tim, I'm sure, would. But anyway, Tim was my own partner.
Ours was literally in my hometown of Wethersfield. Ours was called literally Food Barn.
It's terrible.
It's so bad.
It's so bad.
Food Barn.
So I think at this point we can argue things start to go from bad to worse, right? We learned a lot about Marge. Marge is smart. She gets basically a hint that the calls that were made to, how does she figure out to go to the Twin Cities? The call that was made to Shep Proudfoot, right? And he works at a dealership. And so she sees the connection, and she's like, it looks like I'm going to take a trip to Twin Cities. So she goes there.
Yeah, there's all this great, like, classic. It is a classic detective. Like, it's like a bit of Law and Order, this part of it, like the way she finds out about the dealership is like once he puts the lookout for a dealer, a car with no dealer plates, they kind of get this message that these two guys have checked into this place and they didn't put down the license plate, and it was a Tan Sierra that we're looking for. Yeah, it's really wonderful. Like it's classic, like police work kind of procedural in some ways at the same time.
And they also realized that the Tan Sierra was checked into Paul Bunyan
Yeah.
like motel, right? And that's on the
No, it's a
way.
Blue Ox.
The Blue Ox. There you go. Good work.
It's Paul
You're a
Bunyan's
good
sidekick.
detective. And so basically, they know now that they stayed there and that they had guests, with suggesting prostitutes. So on their
Funny
way,
looking one.
yes, exactly. So on the way, one of the more memorable scenes of this movie, there are so many,
Yeah.
is when she interviews the two people who slept with Carl and how do you say that guy's name?
Gare.
Gare. So Carl and Gare.
Gaear. I'm guessing
That's a hard-
or you can call him Grimsrud. That's his last name.
Yeah, I'm Gare. I'll stick with Gare. So anyway, there's a great scene where they have sex, and then a shot later they're sitting there watching
Side by
TV.
side sex, by the way. Two men sharing a hotel room, having sex with prostitutes and like full-size beds next to one another.
That's another great funny scene.
And then watching the Tonight Show afterwards together.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a good, criminal couple. They do everything together.
They really are a real Bonnie and Clyde. So they actually, she goes to interview the two prostitutes, and she's trying to get information out of them. And the only thing she can get at is the Steve Buscemi character, Carl, is funny looking. And he's not circumcised. And she says, anything funny beyond that? Which was such a great, great line. Anything else funny beyond that? Oh my God, so good. Yeah. And then the other one's like the Marlboro Man, but maybe I'm just psychologically thinking that because he smokes so much. And just... they get nothing. She essentially gets nothing from these two. Like the communication totally breaks down. They're funny. Yeah. It's a funny scene. But there's another scene as she's headed down to Twin Cities. Once she gets there, she gets a call because she was on the news.
Yep,
as
the police has to report on this is big drama in the Minneapolis area. We got a triple homicide on the roadside of Brainerd.
I agree. Good work, detective.
But we never see this, so it would have been a great. I can't believe they didn't do a nice little local news bit.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Nice. I agree.
On the old TVs, that would have been great.
So Mike, how do I say his last name?
Yanagita.
Yanagita. So Mike Yanagita, who went to school with Marge, gives
Hello,
her a call.
How you doing, Marge?
Marge? It's 11 at night, and he's calling her. Says he saw her on the TV, which is plausible, and is like, "Hey, I saw what you're doing. I would love to get a drink if you can." And so Marge, is like, "Hey, good to see you." But anyway, you get the sense later on that she agreed. They're going to meet in Twin Cities, and they're going to have a drink. So the first thing she does when she gets to the Twin Cities, I don't know if it's the first thing, but one of the things she does when she gets to the Twin Cities is she gets dressed up, she puts on makeup, and she goes to a Radisson bar, because you can't do too bad. It's a Radisson, right? How bad can you do, he says. And she meets Mike Yanagato, or
Yanagita.
Yanagita.
You misspelled it like 3 times in the notes.
I'm
and I kept
sorry,
correcting
man.
it. See, this is a trick, Jim. This is a trick. You have all the actors and their character names open in a nice big window so you can reference them. Oh my God,
I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're browbeating me on air. Anyway, so this is probably my favorite scene of the entire movie.
Oh, it's many people. Steve Park, who's a comedian, who's been in a number of small roles. For the most part, he's a character actor. And bunch of television, bunch of movies, plays this character through the roof.
Oh my God, this character is amazing. So anyway, they sit down, and you realize after a little bit that he's kind of off his rocker. He says that his wife had died of leukemia, who's someone they know, Linda Cooksey, and that, he then moves over to get close to her, and he kind of puts his arm around her, and she's like, please don't, go to the other side. Super awkward. Yeah. He's apologizing and apologizing. She's like, no, it's just so I don't have to turn my neck when I talk to you. And then he goes on to talk about how desperate he was. He works at Honeywell, but after losing Linda Cooksey, he's just so lonely. And then he ends, which I think is one of the great kind of like, lines in the film is, "You were such a super lady." And like his desperation is in many ways for me the language of desperation that follows throughout this movie. There's a sense just outside the little bubble of Norm and Marge that the world is essentially horrible and that everything in it is fragile at best and only a couple of moments away from falling back into savagery. You can see that with Jerry, even though he was an idiot, but his lack of understanding and his lack of thinking led to a complete horrible scenario, not only for his wife, but also for the cops and the other two civilians. And all of this, Marge is kind of following in the wake of and seeing. And it's interesting that Mike is just kind of another moment outside of that, right? Like this isn't about the murder. This is about a guy she went to high school with who's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, has been living with his parents, we find out, who was never married to Linda Cooksey.
Nope.
Who completely lied and whose life is essentially falling apart. And I just found that this was an interesting point because why did they put this in there? Like, what does this do to suggest to you, like, and Marge is visibly upset. Like after she comes out of that, the next thing you see her, is this right? You see her in a car and behind her, there's a scene of like a strip mall and she's looking like blind-eyed. Like what just happened? What was this all about? And there was this moment where I think that Marge and Norm, and I even asked the question, like, why did Marge even go there? Like, as much as we suggest Marge and Norm are the perfect couple, is Marge kind of bored with Norm? Is she tired of, like, dealing with Norm and his fucking 3-cent stamps? Because I would be. And
I don't think that. I think this is dramatic reading, but I keep going.
I do think that there's a certain amount of, like, Marge goes there and for a moment she's like, maybe I'm going to have, I don't know. Like maybe she realizes he's a nut, so immediately turns him off. But why even go get a drink with Mike?
Yeah, why get a drink with Yanagita is a very good and unanswerable question. But there's parts of it. It's like she has this job in which she wears the same uniform every day. And she's going to the city. And as a precursor to this, she, even before she goes out to dinner, she's dressed up, even in her outfit entering the hotel. She has this really sweet doff of a knit cap and a nice sweater as well. And so she's like a classic suburban wife that's going to the city and she just wants to dress up. She wants to feel the move of a city rather than the move of a suburb. And that's kind of how I read it. And getting a drink with a Mike Yanagita is an excuse to just dress up a little more. I don't think she's truly venturing into an escape of like, oh, I'm going to have an affair with him that evening. You could stretch to read it that way, but it's so quickly dispelled in the language. And I don't think it's simply because he's crazy. It's just she's not available that way in my mind. I think she's available to the moment of feeling like it's nice to dress up. And I think that's something a woman in this context can look for and desire, is like to feel cosmopolitan for a moment, right?
Yeah.
Because she is a smart woman. She probably could have, she probably is college educated. She doesn't just become you don't get a sense that like she became a cop at the age of like, 20 or something and then just worked her way up. She was probably someone who studied for the job and she interviewed for the job and she got the job, and because she deserved it.
And I think it's a good reading and it's fair. And I think my reading might be a little bit like, why should people, once they're married, ever have a connection with someone else? That's silly. I understand. And I recognize that's a bad reading. But there's interesting because there's for a moment there when she goes and see Mike, there's a sense that maybe they can communicate. Maybe there is some sort of like discussion to have. And you never know like what comes of that. But as soon as he opens his mouth, she's like, whoa, what is this? And she, can't help but say, look, should I come back should we have a drink another time? Like, should
Yeah,
we
yeah.
reschedule? Like, there was no ability for her to even start. And I
No.
think that scene for me is the breakdown, right? The breakdown of Mike, obviously, but also the breakdown in general that you see throughout this film. Like, you go back and you start thinking about it.
Mhm.
Carl can't communicate with Jerry.
Right.
They are trying to give Jerry therapy, right? And Carl is like, it's your wife, Jerry. It's your
Yeah.
own wife. And then he wants to say something else, right? And Jerry's like, it's personal, it's not. And then he can't. He has
Nope.
no words for it. And he's like, let's just go see the Tansiera. And that's
I
it.
do think like this bigger theme that you hit on is really good. Like I do this, you title it in our notes, this language of despair or this inability to communicate. And it happens again and again and
Oh my
again. One of my
God.
favorite ones, I think the Yanagita one is like a top one, but also the one that happens, the scene that's kind of soon after that with when Carl kind of goes on a date, if you will, with an escort.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah, totally.
they're seeing a show in Minneapolis. He's doing the same thing that Marge is doing. It's like, I'm in
Totally.
the city, let's get a dinner and a show, and he needs to pay for
It's
a date.
true.
And she's dressed up and she's like, I've never been in the this room. What is it called? The Hollywood room or whatever the fuck it's
Like,
called. It doesn't
it's like the
matter.
VIP room or whatever.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, this is great. And they try to have a conversation like they're trying to be normal people. And it's a complete failure. It's a
It's true.
complete failure. He's like, you ever been to a show? And then he does this stupid thing. Like she's trying to ask him what's his work. And he's a kidnapper. So he can't communicate that. And she tries to say like, how do you like your job? And she's like, I'm fucking escort. There's nothing, you know? And so they're just miserable in that conversation.
And there's obviously the phone calls with Carl and Jerry. I'm not going to debate you,
Yeah.
Jerry. I'm not going to debate you. Goes on
Yeah.
all the time. One of my favorite quotes from this movie.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he can't communicate with his son. He forgets
Jerry
about
doesn't.
his son. Yeah, Jerry can't
Yeah,
even
he
communicate with
literally
his son.
forgets about him. It's Stan Grossman that has to remind him after his wife is kidnapped and they've agreed. And there's this, and that's the beginning of the miscommunication, lack of communication between also Jerry and, Wade, his father-in-law. And like, he's like trying to say, it's my deal. It's my wife. I'm going to deliver. They told me I have to deliver the money. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to have that. No. And Wade goes to the drop off with $1 million, and Carl is there going like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he's like, no money, no Gene, no money, and he immediately gets shot.
He's like, what is going on with you people?
Yeah.
It's so great. And then there's the moment, and you've already referred to this, I think, but this is the scene that William Macy ad-libbed, was where he's trying to practice on the phone. You don't
Yeah.
realize he's practicing. He's calling Wade, and he's like, Wade, it's Gene.
Oh God.
It's Gene.
Oh dear.
And then he does it a couple of times, and you realize he's just practicing what sounds best. And when he calls, obviously he gets her receptionist, and so he's like, "Oh, Wade Gunderson, please." It's like just complete. Oh, Gustafson. It's just completely off. Right?
Yeah.
The language is a performance. There's no payoff at all, and you kind of showed that.
Right. But this is where we go into, it's a performance of a community though. And there is lack of communication moments, but there are also communicative moments that are really interesting. So there's two I had in mind,
Sure.
to the all you can eat buffet. And, the detective comes in to tell her about like, the phone numbers and, that is going to lead Marge to traveling to Minneapolis. And you get a sense that like Norm is like checked out, chewing like he's like a cow in the field with his cud. But then she says, I guess I'm going to Minneapolis. And then he stops and he's like, oh yeah. So you realize like he's really listening. And another one too, that is like this, where you feel like they're talking past one another, is when that cop is interviewing the bartender about the funny guy he saw who's talking about like, having killed people,
That's the best.
that were mean to him. And you feel like they're just like, nothing is making sense to either of them. But at the same time, this becomes the piece of information that gets Marge to find them in the hideout by the lake. So there is this communication is is definitely, the stakes are bizarrely, non-communicative, non-fixed, but there's meaning in them, and sometimes the meaning is important, and then other times the meaning is like, I'm not really hearing you, you're an idiot, or you don't matter, and we're going to ignore one another. So it is funny that I think it exists in both ways.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely, it's not one way. I guess it's the way I'm reading it. But the other piece to me that kind of, and this is preparation for another Coen Brothers movie we'll watch. So there is also that. This is me kind of prepping the soil, if you will, is, when Marge and Norm are in bed, they're watching a nature show. And the nature
Mm-hmm.
show is about the ants, right? And it's talking about the ants that are going to go into their hole and, lay their larva, and then the life cycle begins. And you're like, oh, you know what? That's kind of like them. And they're going to go in and they're going to have their baby in 2 months. And, people are like, and they seem so domestically contented in the bed. And like, everything's fine. But it's like, how can you erase everything that came before it? And in fact, that nature show is, I think, even more horrific in that it's suggesting how close they are in their little bastion like saged house to the horror and the kind of savagery that's all around them. Right. And I think I don't feel any sense of like, oh, there's actually a place in the home, in the hearth, where you can escape. It almost seems like, it's all just a thin line between, and she's a cop, so there's that thin blue line idea, but a thin line between, them in the bed watching that and everything else out there, like the Carls, like the whatever his name is, Peter Stormare plays. Like they're all, or like even the Mike, you say his last name, even all of them, right? They're too close in some ways, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Jerry Lundegaards. I don't come away from this movie feeling any sense of domestic bliss. I don't get that. I know a lot of people read it like, yeah, Norm and Marge are, I feel like Norm and Marge are under siege. And I feel like, they almost feel like they're the last two holding on. And having a baby is like a nightmare. It's like Rosemary's Baby.
Oh God, come on.
I do. I don't feel
Well, I mean,
any sense of security by
I
this
think
movie.
I think it. Well, here's I think if you, I think it makes sense. What's funny is if you look at the TV series, and in the first season, there's the cop Gus that literally pulls over the malevolent Malvo, played by what's his name?
Peter Stormare.
No, Billy Bob Thornton, right?
Oh,
Who's
gotcha.
the murderer, right? And this is in the TV series, and Malvo's like could murder him the same way that Stormare does to the cop on the side of the road. And he basically tells him, he gives that kind of speech that's not far from No Country for Old Men at the very end, that we're going to come to, about like, you have a choice here. You can let me walk away. And he knows, the cop knows he's evil, and he knows he's in jeopardy with this evilness. And I think that's what you're alluding to, is you feel like Marge and her family with Norm is in jeopardy potentially, right? With this amount of malevolence around them. And the cop in this moment in the TV series lets him go, right? Because he fears for his own life in that moment. And so I guess I could see it that way. But before you take back over, the importance of there is the contrast in the way that this film finishes. There's two important things that happen. There's the domestic bliss at the very end, where they literally basically say, I love you to one another. But I think more importantly is the speech that
Yeah.
Marge gives Gare after she catches him, and this conversation about, and what's it for, a little bit of money. Gare is not the target audience of this speech, because Gare is the most emotionally disconnected of all characters in the film, right? And he behaves in the most vicious ways with the wood chipper, trying to grind his way out of this problem, and make the bodies disappear. But the speech is really meant for Jerry, because Jerry did have what you think is a perfect little life, even though it's not perfect. We know it's not. And I guess that's where you're somewhat right, is like lives that appear straightforward and simple and good, if you will. Jerry seems like someone that should have heard this speech and just like, talk to your wife, you idiot. I'm sure she would help figure out this stupid $350,000 mistake, and maybe you wouldn't keep your job, but he's maybe just afraid she'd divorce him, right? Because she's under the thumb of her daddy still. Is she much of a partner, actually, if they can't have these conversations, right?
Yeah, or even think about Jerry at the final scene. What's he like?
Yeah, he's hiding out in the motel as the cops are finding out. Say, yeah, but just a moment. I'll be there in a moment. Just a moment.
They get him on the bed, and he's like a wild animal.
Yeah.
He's out of it. He's screaming. He's all of what you said.
That's when he's finally out of it. He's
gone,
lost.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think that's where everything is going in this film. I do feel like there is that sense, and there is a deep darkness to the Coen brothers. If we're going to talk about the Coen brothers,
sure.
And I think that deep darkness, people are like, yeah, and then there's this happy couple. And it's like, part of the happy couple difficulty for me is having her go and look at these bodies with a cup of coffee and just be like, kind of completely completely detached in her own way. Now, that's how cops are. I'm not saying that, she should be any different. Like, you have to be to do that job. Understood.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, you were describing the scene, it was reminding me of The Wire. And remember the Bunk and McNulty scene when they're analyzing the shot where the somebody got murdered, and they don't talk the entire time, and they just work the scene perfectly, as good cops do. And she's doing that. She's just verbalizing her working of the scene as a cop. But you could also read it. It's just a job. It's a hard job, and there's occasionally murders, but it's just a job too.
How can that not come home? Right, no, that's what they say about the police officer. That's what they say. Like, all of that stuff does come home.
But she doesn't. She finds solace in her husband and his little accomplishments. Like, they need those 3-cent stamps, they're needed. So the little boring people and their simple, boring couple lives are needed. We're necessary, to complete the picture of domesticity, even though, yes, it's under stress, as Jim Groom feels like they're about to be encroached by, the devil's about.
I'm going to rephrase my thing, because go finish it. I'm going to let you finish.
No, I'm done. I want you to finish.
I'm going to rephrase this. What I remember in college reading the famous Dostoevsky, where basically, what is it called? Jesus. Crime and Punishment, right?
Okay.
So Crime and Punishment, the whole idea, no morality anymore, right? Like, it's basically like a Nietzschean take. And so Dostoevsky sets up this horrific situation, kind of like the Coen brothers do in Fargo. And the end scene is him going to prison, find God. And this is like the last 20 pages. And then, talks about Lazarus and says, actually, everything's fine. Like, we can be reborn from that. That's not, I found God. So those 230 pages or 300 pages of horrific moral existential blankness can be erased or forgotten. And the fact is they can't. And that's the same thing happening in this movie. Like, no matter what you create with Marge and Norm, it's completely overshadowed. And no oxygen with the first part.
Norm is around every corner, ready to bring you a hamburger.
I disagree. And
Ready
it's
to
not
have
a very
meal with
good
you.
hamburger.
That doesn't
on top
happen
of
in
that.
Crime and Punishment. There isn't a Norm showing up every third chapter bringing you food, being at your side. That's the other reason. I'm not saying like, I do think as we proceed through this, the darkness the despair does overshadow all things ultimately. I think the Coen brothers do get darker and darker, but man, Joel's making a movie with his wife and he needs her to have her moment. She's safe and he keeps her safe throughout.
Fair enough. And she's amazing. It's great performance.
Yeah.
But I think Norm and her get divorced like right after the baby's born. She starts drinking.
No.
I seriously, she becomes a
She
horrible
has to
drunk.
become the hard-boiled cop, huh? Even in
She has
minutes.
She is a horrible. That's what's going to happen here, right? We know it.
Nope. I think they're doing pretty good.
There's going to be some malfeasance.
Just 2 more. Nagita is not coming back into Marge's life.
She's going to actually have a relationship with Mike Nagagita, and that's going to happen. And, Norm's going to hook up with the 2 prostitutes at the Blue Ox. That's the real story they never told.
The thing is, now you're finally venturing with me, Jim Groom. You would not do this when I was talking about the sisters and their like shotgun relationships at the end of not the day after. What is the Night of the Comet?
That's right.
And now I'm trying to say it's like there's no way that this isn't going to end up into some big menage a trois family. And you're like, Mike, where are you going with that? No, you're right. These are messy lies, and there's a lot of miscommunication. But I believe in Norm and Marge, despite your
team Norm and Marge.
I'm
team Jerry Lundegaard.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. That's another one in the books.
Yeah.